There is a way of being disciplined that most people never discover. They believe discipline requires force, that you must push yourself, drive yourself, be hard on yourself. They think of discipline as something aggressive, something that demands willpower and constant effort and the ability to override what you want in favor of what you should do. And so they try this approach. They set strict rules. They create punishments for failure. They treat themselves like an opponent that must be conquered, and sometimes it works. For a while, until the force becomes too much, until the constant pushing exhausts them, until they rebel against their own rigidity and abandon the discipline altogether, and then they believe they have failed, that they lack what it takes. That discipline is simply not for them. But they are wrong, not about their failure, but about what discipline is. Welcome to the Quiet Path. This is a space where we step away from the harsh demands and impossible standards that the world places upon us, where we sit with what is difficult, where we remember that true strength is not loud or forceful, but quiet and steady. Here, we do not push or strive or battle against ourselves. We simply learn a different way. A way that is sustainable, a way that actually works. And today, we are looking at something that changes everything about how you approach discipline, how you build habits, how you move toward what matters. We are looking at discipline without force, the calm method. And it is not what you think. You have been taught that discipline is about control, about making yourself do things you do not want to do, about overriding your natural inclinations and desires. And there is some truth in this. Discipline does involve doing things that are not immediately appealing. But the way most people approach it, the way they try to force themselves into compliance, creates more problems than it solves, because force generates resistance. When you push against yourself, part of you pushes back. When you try to control yourself through harshness and rigidity, part of you rebels, and you end up in a constant internal battle, exhausting yourself, creating suffering, and rarely achieving the lasting change you seek. There is another way. A way that comes from understanding rather than from force. A way that works with your nature instead of against it. A way that is gentle but not weak, patient but not passive. This way recognizes that you are not an enemy to be conquered. You are a being to be understood, to be guided, to be worked with. And when you approach yourself this way, when you bring curiosity instead of criticism, acceptance instead of aggression, something shifts, the resistance melts, the battle ends. And discipline becomes not a fight but a practice, not something you force but something you cultivate. In traditional Japanese culture, there is an understanding of discipline that is very different from what the West typically practices. It is visible in arts like calligraphy, tea ceremony, martial arts. The practitioner is not trying to force perfection, not trying to muscle their way to mastery. They are simply showing up, day after day, repeating the same movements, the same forms, with full attention, with presence, without judgment about whether they are doing it right or wrong, without harshness when they make mistakes, just consistent, calm practice. And over time, without force, skill develops. Mastery emerges, not because it was forced, but because it was allowed to grow through patient repetition and gentle persistence. This is the essence of the calm method. You do not force yourself to change. You create the conditions for change to occur naturally. You do not battle against your habits. You simply practice new ones, gently, consistently, without drama. You do not judge yourself harshly when you fail. You simply notice what happened and begin again. There is no punishment, no self-criticism, no belief that you are weak or broken or lacking willpower. Just the quiet understanding that building discipline is like building anything else. It takes time, it takes repetition, it takes patience, and it cannot be rushed. Most people fail at discipline because they approach it with intensity. They decide they are going to change everything. They create elaborate plans, they set ambitious goals, and they throw themselves at it with enormous energy. For a few days or weeks, they maintain this intensity. They follow the rules, they do the things, they feel proud, successful, like they have finally figured it out. But intensity cannot be sustained. Eventually, the energy fades, the motivation wanes. And when it does, when the force is no longer available, everything collapses. The discipline disappears, and they believe they failed. But they did not fail at discipline, they failed at intensity, which is not the same thing. Discipline is not about intensity, it is about consistency, about showing up even when you do not feel like it, even when there is no energy, even when it is boring or difficult or you would rather do anything else. This is what discipline actually is, the ability to continue regardless of how you feel. And you cannot do this through force. Force depends on feeling, on having the energy to push, but real discipline is what remains when the energy is gone. It is the quiet commitment that keeps you going, not because you are inspired, but because you decided this matters, because you made an agreement with yourself. And you are keeping it, not dramatically, not perfectly, just consistently. Consider someone learning a musical instrument. If they practice for 6 hours one day and then not at all for the next week, they will make very little progress. But if they practice for 20 minutes every single day, even when they do not want to, even when they are tired, even when it feels pointless, they will improve steadily, not through force, not through dramatic effort, but through the simple accumulation of consistent practice. This is how discipline works, not through grand gestures, but through small, repeated actions, through showing up again and again, whether you feel like it or not, whether it is exciting or not, whether you can see progress or not. You just keep showing up. And over time, that showing up creates everything. The calm method understands this. It does not ask for intensity. It asks for presence. It does not demand perfection. It asks for participation. You are not trying to be perfect. You are simply trying to be consistent. And when you fail, when you miss a day or break a commitment, you do not spiral into self-judgment. You do not decide you are undisciplined or weak. You simply notice what happened. You understand why if you can. And then you begin again, without drama, without making it mean something about your character, just a calm return to the practice. Because this is what discipline is, not never failing, but always returning. There is a teaching about the archer. The master archer does not force the arrow, does not grip the bow with white knuckles and strain to hit the target. The master simply draws the bow with proper form, aims with clear focus, and releases. The arrow goes where it goes. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it misses, but the archer does not attach to the outcome, does not become tense or frustrated, simply draws again, aims again, releases again, over and over, with calm attention, with patience. And through this calm repetition, skill develops. The arrows begin to hit more often, not because the archer tried harder, but because the archer practiced correctly, with presence, without force, without attachment to each individual result. This is how you build discipline. You decide what you want to practice, what habits you want to develop, and then you do them, not perfectly, not with enormous willpower, just calmly, regularly. You show up at the same time, you do the thing. You do not make it a big production, you do not require motivation. You simply do it because this is what you do now. This is part of your practice. And when you miss, when life interrupts, or you forget, or you just do not do it, you do not punish yourself. You simply return the next day, or the next opportunity, whenever you can, and you continue, without making the failure mean anything, without letting one missed day become a reason to quit. You just keep practicing, keep returning, keep showing up, and the discipline builds, not through force, but through patient accumulation. People often ask how to develop motivation, how to make themselves want to do the difficult things. And the answer is, you do not. You do not try to manufacture motivation. You do not wait for it to appear, you simply act regardless of whether you feel motivated. Because motivation is not required for discipline. In fact, waiting for motivation is often what prevents discipline. You tell yourself you will start when you feel ready, when you feel inspired, when you have energy, but that day never comes. Or it comes and goes quickly, and you are left waiting. But discipline does not wait. Discipline acts, not because it feels good, not because there is inspiration, but because this is the practice, this is the commitment, and it is kept whether you feel like keeping it or not. This is not harsh, this is not force. This is simply understanding that feelings are temporary, that motivation comes and goes, that inspiration is unreliable. but practice can be constant if you let it. If you stop making it dependent on how you feel. If you simply show up and do what you said you would do in the smallest way possible without requiring it to be perfect or impressive. Just showing up, just doing something, just maintaining the thread. And this small, consistent action creates more than any amount of forced intensity ever could. The calm method also understands that discipline is not punishment. Many people use discipline as a way to prove they are good enough. They push themselves as penance for perceived failures. They create rigid rules as a way to control themselves because they do not trust themselves. And this is not discipline. This is self-violence. This is using structure to avoid dealing with deeper issues. And it does not work, not sustainably. Because you cannot build a life on self-rejection. You cannot create lasting change through constant criticism. You will only create more suffering, more resistance, more eventual collapse. Real discipline comes from care, from valuing yourself enough to follow through on what matters, from understanding that showing up for yourself, even in small ways, is an act of respect, of honoring the person you are and the person you are becoming. This is very different from forcing yourself to do things because you believe you should, because you are afraid of being lazy or worthless. When discipline comes from fear or self-rejection, it is brittle. When it comes from care, it is sustainable. It can last, because you are not fighting against yourself. You are working with yourself. You are being kind to yourself. And kindness, it turns out, is far more effective than harshness. Consider how you respond when you break a commitment to yourself. Most people immediately go to judgment. They call themselves weak, lazy, undisciplined. They make it mean something terrible about who they are, and this creates shame, and shame is paralyzing. It makes it harder to try again, harder to show up tomorrow, harder to maintain any discipline at all. But what if instead of judgment, you brought curiosity? What if you simply noticed that you did not do the thing and asked why? Not in a critical way, just genuinely wondering, what got in the way? What was difficult? What did you need that you did not have? And from that understanding, you could adjust. You could try something different. You could make it easier. You could remove an obstacle. And then you could try again, without the weight of shame, without the belief that you are broken. Just a calm adjustment and a new attempt. This is the calm method in practice. You approach yourself the way a good teacher approaches a student, with patience, with encouragement, with the understanding that learning takes time, that mistakes are part of the process, that struggling does not mean you should give up. A good teacher does not yell at a student for not understanding, does not shame them for making errors. The teacher simply explains again, shows again, encourages the student to try again, and remains patient through the entire process. This is how you must treat yourself. Not as an enemy, not as someone who needs to be controlled through force, but as someone who is learning, someone who deserves patience, someone who will get there if given the right support and enough time. The calm method also recognizes that discipline is not the same for everyone. What works for one person may not work for another. And trying to force yourself into someone else's system, someone else's routine, someone else's definition of discipline will only create frustration. You must find what works for you, what fits your life, your personality, your challenges. And this requires experimentation, requires trying different approaches, requires being willing to adjust when something is not working. There is no single right way. There is only what works for you. And discovering what works requires patience, requires gentle exploration, requires being kind to yourself through the trial and error. Some people need structure, clear times, clear rules. Others need more flexibility, more intuitive response to what each day requires. Some people do better with small, frequent actions. Others prefer longer, less frequent sessions. Some need accountability. Others need privacy. And none of this is right or wrong. It is just different. And the calm method allows for this difference. It does not impose a rigid system that everyone must follow. It simply offers principles. Consistency over intensity, patience over force, kindness over criticism. And within those principles, you find your own way. You discover what discipline looks like for you, and you build it slowly, carefully, with respect for your own nature. Over time, something interesting happens. The discipline that once required conscious effort becomes easier, not because you suddenly have more willpower, but because it has become part of who you are, part of your routine, part of your identity. You no longer have to force yourself to do it. You just do it. The same way you brush your teeth, the same way you eat breakfast. It is just what you do. And this is the goal. Not to forever require enormous effort, but to eventually require very little, because the practice has become natural, has become integrated. And this happens not through force, but through patient repetition, through showing up even when it was hard, through returning even when you failed, through gentle persistence until the new pattern becomes the default pattern. This is discipline without force. This is the calm method. And it works. Not quickly, not dramatically, but reliably, sustainably, in a way that does not exhaust you or require you to battle against yourself. You simply practice, you show up, you do what you said you would do, and when you do not, you return without judgment. You keep going, not because you are forcing yourself, but because you have made a commitment to yourself, to what matters, and you are honoring that commitment, one small action at a time, one day at a time, with patience, with kindness, with the understanding that you are building something that will last, not through intensity that burns out, but through gentle consistency that endures. If you found something here that changes how you think about discipline, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to The Quiet Path, not because you need more motivation or more systems, but because this space exists for those who are ready to stop fighting with themselves and start practicing a gentler way, a way that actually works, a way that respects who you are while helping you become who you want to be. And perhaps what helped you see discipline differently today will help someone else tomorrow who has been exhausting themselves through force and needs to discover there is another way. Walk slowly. See clearly. I'll see you again on The Quiet Path.